Hi everyone. So the goal of this video is to understand molecular muscle. Specifically, I want you to be able to explain how the molecular components of muscle work to make muscle contract. So this is a picture that you have seen probably in a previous unit. If you're on this video, you've probably already mastered this, but I'll briefly go over it. So this is a whole muscle. All right, and the whole muscle can be broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller parts. So this is a whole muscle. Sometimes we have fascicles in our muscles. So this is a fascicle. And then a fascicle is really just a bunch of muscle fibers. So if we look inside a fascicle, we'll see that we can pull out like one muscle fiber. All right. And a muscle fiber is one cell of muscle. All right. So that's something that you might have seen in a previous lesson. All right. And this is another picture that you might have seen in a previous lesson. So this is the sarcolemma, and this clear surface is the sarcolemma. That's kind of like the cell membrane. And then we have a myofibril here. So this is a whole muscle fiber. And then even within a muscle fiber, we have these little things called myofibrils. All right. And then we'll look at the next level on the next slide here. All right, so working our way down, we're going from a muscle fiber, and then we're going to go down to a myofibril, and then even smaller than that is a sarcomere. Okay, so that's why I put these in order here: muscle fiber to myofibril to sarcomere. All right, so in the last unit we saw myofibrils. In this unit we're looking at something even smaller called a sarcomere. And the sarcomere are made of thick and thin filaments. So if you look closely at this picture, the red filaments here, the red lines here, are what we call thick filaments, and then the blue ones are what we call thin filaments. All right, I'll tell you what those things are made of specifically on the next slide. So those are made of myosin and actin. I'm going to try to get this little GIF to play here. But myosin and actin are the two major proteins in your muscle that cause muscle contraction. I'm very fond of these things. These are actually what I studied when I was in grad school, so I know these things very well. Here, I'll play this video one more time for you. But a myosin molecule are these purple ones here, and they're able to grab on to actin and pull on it. So all these myosin molecules here are part of the thick filament, and they're able to grab actin, which is the thin filament, and pull on it. So myosin and actin are proteins, and we have millions of myosin in every muscle fiber. So there's like a bunch of like little molecular motors that are just chugging along and pulling and generating force and motion. And so when we are working out or when we're doing any kind of movement, the reason why we're able to move, the reason why I'm able to move my muscles right now as I talk is because I have millions of those myosin molecules grabbing actin and pulling, and that's what makes our muscles contract. All right, so the way this works is there's like four major steps to how myosin does its job. All right, I'll start maybe over here in the top left. So in this simple picture, we have myosin and we have actin. All right, and actually this whole component is myosin. This is what we might call like a myosin head, and it's sticking out and it's trying to grab onto actin. All right, so it's able to do that eventually. It's able to grab on to actin. And when it grabs on, it does this motion called a power stroke. And a power stroke is basically that little motion that we kind of see in this video where myosin is able to grab it and pull it in one direction. It's able to grab and pull. All right, that's what we call the power stroke. During the power stroke, it releases two small molecules called phosphate and ADP, and it's still strongly bound to actin. Eventually, it lets go of actin. It lets go because an ATP molecule comes in and makes myosin separate from actin. But that ATP molecule is pretty crucial. That ATP molecule is an energy molecule. We actually talked about ATP recently when we talked about things crossing the cell membrane. It's a form of molecular energy that our bodies use whenever it needs some kind of energy. And this is a really good example because our muscles need a lot of energy. And that energy is in the form of ATP. That ATP molecule is being used by myosin to generate that force and to generate that motion when we are working out or doing any activity. All right, so ATP comes in and it's bound to the myosin. It makes the myosin kind of reload. It reloads and then it's able to bind to actin again. So you can kind of see that in this little GIF here where myosin comes off and then it's able to grab on and pull again. And that's kind of what goes on right over here where the ATP molecule is um, making the myosin kind of like recock or rebound, and it's going to grab onto actin again over here. And the cycle just repeats. And this cycle is sometimes called the cross bridge cycle. All right, and just a quick note about ATP. So ATP is a high energy molecule. Again, like I said before, it's a high energy molecule. It's a molecule that our bodies use a lot when we are doing any kind of activity that requires energy. ATP is like the currency of energy in our cells. It is crucial for the process I just showed you. So myosin can break it down into ADP and phosphate. And so that's what this picture is kind of showing you here, where ATP, the TP stands for triphosphate. And then it can be broken down into ADP, diphosphate, and then an extra phosphate here. When you do that, when you break that bond, you release a lot of energy. And our myosin molecules and a lot of other things in our body use that energy to do different things. In this case, to make our muscles work. All right. So I hope that was useful. There might be a few practice questions for you to try related to this content, but hopefully you understand how muscles work, especially on a molecular level.